This episode of Bit for You is sponsored by Houndstown. Are you in need of daycare, boarding, or grooming for the dog in your life? Be sure to come to Houndstown, home to the happiest pets on earth.
As we look back at our lives, we see moments that we could define as forks in the road, where we can make one decision or the other, and that's going to define our path. These moments are really important because they give us a sense of ownership over our life. Today's story is about Rocky Point native Jeff Kraebel. Jeff has utilized these moments to get past some of the toughest situations in his life, and by doing that, he's really shaped the person he's become.
I grew up in Bohemia, born in 1971. Very little technology, middle class, everybody outside all the time. Blocks played each other in every sport you could think of. Like, that was how I grew up. My father owned a pizzeria, maybe like 2 blocks from my house, and he owned that pizzeria for 37 years. So I was 2 when he got it, and it was awesome. It kept me overweight pretty much my whole youth. I was a little portly, just because when you could eat as much pizza as you want and drink as much fountain soda as you want, it'll work you. Back then, I always knew I was a good-hearted person, but I just always tended to run with like a more rough crowd. And I guess maybe I always wanted to be like that. It was very tough for me because I always knew I was different than everybody else. Something inside of me, from the time I could be conscious of it, separated me from everybody. I always felt kind of alone, whether I was in a crowded room or by myself. Everybody liked me. I had friends that played football. I had friends that listened to rock. I had people that when breakdancing first started happening, I had some of those friends, and we all hung out. I got to University of Montana in 1991, and I didn't know what to do. I found, there was my roommate and some guys. They had a football team that played in the college intramural league, so I started doing that. And that got me into it with a couple of football players from the Montana Grizzlies. And they challenged me, saying that they could, tear me up pretty good in a one-on-one with this receiver guy, and I beat up on him pretty good. And then the rugby team was there, and they saw it, and they asked me to if I was interested in coming out and playing. And I was like, well, I don't know anything about rugby. And you have to remember, I'm in Missoula, Montana in 1991 with a flat top, a tail, a gold chain, and a tank top, right? So, I am completely out of place. Partying and rugby and that whole, all-in philosophy, I loved it. I bought into it, and I played well. When you play a full contact sport that lasts 80 minutes, when you're done, I've never had a more satisfying feeling. The only thing that's come close now is obstacle course racing. I did well, but I didn't fit in, Some of the guys liked me, but I really wasn't in. I hung out with some of the parties, but not all. I kept to myself a lot. Again, referring back to how I just always wound up feeling by myself. I never understood why. I went home and I was really lost, and the first thing I did was go to the bar that I left when I left, and I found the same guys sitting there telling the same stories with the same people, and so I fell right back in with them and wore my welcome out pretty quick at my parents' house, right? But all that time, and I want to emphasize this because I forgot, all that time I'm exercising. From the time I was a kid all the way through, I still did something. I found the gym at 14 years old, and I never left it. All right, and as far as sports, I had a road bike when I was in my teens so I could get to the gym, so I logged lots of miles on that, and I had some really good elevated athletic spots in my life in the outer leagues, like the outlier leagues, like flag football, softball leagues. I was very well known. Like, I was at handball courts. I was a very solid player, but I was always in that world. Again, always, hiding out with the people, not living the dare to be great moment, I always noticed that I felt better when I worked out. So if I have really bad anxiety, I worked out. If I was depressed, I would go running. I'm not a science guy, but in bro science terms, the chemicals that get released into your brain when you do sustained cardiovascular exercise that pushes your heart rate up enough, it's a feel-good drug, and your body produces it on its own, so I try to use it often still to this day. I was playing rugby, I think it was 42, And I was starting to get that balance. It was a couple of years. I'd had the kids for a couple of years. I was on, I wouldn't call it the upswing, but I wasn't spiraling down anymore. I had kind of leveled off. And there was this coach we had, his name was Daryl, he was from England. Rest in peace, because he died of a heart attack a couple of years ago, but he was my first mentor. Never had one. I was known as a rowdy rugby player who will throw down a good game but gets in his own way sometimes. I don't take shit from anybody, I'll fight anytime, and I'll win every drink up. You know, that was me. And I coached college rugby and was very successful in the early days before it got really regulated because it was a bunch of maniacs. And if you wanted to push yourself on that level, I was the guy you wanted to be around. So 20-something-year-olds loved to hang around with me when I was in my 30s because I was really pushing it. But when I hit 42, I was playing some of the best rugby in my life, and I was playing for Coach Daryl, and I had just come off probably the best year I played. We went to the championship, although I came off the bench and, you know, had to accept, it was the first time I humbly accepted the criticism and ate it and played when he played me and didn't talk bad about him. And that was like the first step of not being a coward, right? That's like the first thing. That's when you start becoming self-aware that like your whole character is ridiculous, right? So I just knew that there was something about this guy, and I just listened to what he said. And he also put up with me, allowed me to be me, and I wound up having a very successful couple of years in my early 40s playing rugby. I probably played my best rugby, I would say, from 40 to 42. But I took a cleat to the face in a game. I chased this little wing down. It was a great play. I grabbed him though, and I slammed him so hard into the ground, he bounced up and his cleat went through my nose, shattered my nose, stitches, blood, concussion, the whole 9 yards. That was my last rugby match. Very defining moment in my life, because who am I now?
Looking for your pet's new day camp or a place to stay the night? Houndstown offers doggy daycare for your best friend to interact all day while you're away. Join Houndstown today. Our doors are always open for our new friends.
I went back and tried to play rugby the next season, and I was hesitant in contact, and it was over. You know, I was like, I never wanted to be that guy in any sport that just hung around and played and sucked. You know, so I was like, all right. I found free running. I just started running more. I seem to notice that when I run, it made me feel better than when I lift, like cardio. And I started just adding things into it on my own. You know, I would do bear crawls. I would stop at the schoolyard and do pull-ups and stuff. I was always addicted to walking on fences and stuff. I did it from the time I was young, so I just incorporated that into my workouts all the time, which is walking on chain link fences and handicap railings and everything. And that's kind of where everything started to change, because I started finding ways to make myself feel better. And then every day that I felt better, I did better things. I also, by not being around the rugby team and not being around certain people, I wasn't surrounded by people that were 10 years younger than me that were still living the life of going out all the time. Because again, I'm not crapping on that. They're young, they do what they want. But here I am with these kids, really, where should I be? I shouldn't be traveling for the weekend playing rugby and drinking, I should be home. So a friend of mine had mentioned American Ninja Warrior. So it had been around for a while, but I'd never heard of it. And he mentioned it, showed me a clip, and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. I'd love to see how I would do in that. Knowing that their style was different, I just filed it away. I wasn't ready. Still in my struggles, but in a better place. Another year goes around, we're coming around to the same time for the entries, it gets brought up to me again. I say, all right, I'm in, I'll go for it. I went online, and the first thing you find out is the application's 1,000,000 miles long, so I was already overwhelmed. There I am on my phone, I don't even own a computer. So I'm on my phone, I'm filling out this thing, it takes me like 3 days in increments, because I don't have the attention span to do that straight up. And now I need this video. I get hit up by a friend of mine who actually makes movies in Hollywood, that he's gonna be in town and him and his brother are gonna help me. So they flew into a Christmas party, I went to the Christmas party, they came and did my entry video. And we filmed it right in Personal Fitness in Rocky Point. I got permission from Ed and we did it in there, and they took it back and they edited it, and I thought it came out pretty awesome. Gets to the end of April, I get an email. It says, American Ninja Warrior, why won't you answer your phone? We've been trying to contact you. I'm at work. I'm like, holy, you know? I call them up and they're like, hey, Jeff Kraebel, you've been chosen out of tens of thousands of people to compete on American Ninja Warrior Pittsburgh Regional this season. And I'm hesitant. I'm like, get out of here, man. You know, there's no way. I'm like, what are the odds, right? They're like, no, for real. You know, this and that, this is your contact. You got to report in 2 weeks to Pittsburgh. So they tell you all this stuff and they say 2 weeks. I'm so excited. I'm like, oh my God. And at the same time, I'm like, oh my God. Like, I never trained on this stuff. You know, my entry video was all like, I want to see how my training translates on that course. I want to see just with what I do, what it will do. And so they liked that. They liked the backstory. The whole experience was so positive, and every single person I interacted with was so good to me. They like my story, whatever it was, they just believed in me. Not necessarily how far I was going to get, I don't think, but in the attempt, I guess. So balance beam comes up and it made everybody fall. But again, referring back to all the balance work I do, that was my strength. So I make it. And that was where I let go. Right after that obstacle, I dropped to my knees, I slapped my arms on the ground, I took my shirt off and my headband, I whipped them into the crowd, and I yelled. I yelled like really loud. And I looked like a dragon in the sense you could see all the steam and the cold air, the heat from my mouth, everything was coming out, and I just felt like I finally let go. You know, here I am, you know? And I leaped up on these upside down chime things, and that was my Super Bowl. I was like, wow, I feel amazing. So now I got this new feeling. I'm like, hey, this is what it is. You do these things at this level and you get this reward, right? So the downside to that is the dump that comes afterwards, right? So after every great moment comes the moment after that. I left a lot of pain there, man. Like a ton. Like years of self-loathing and just stuff. And I came back probably about 70% lighter. I wasn't where I'm at now yet, but man, did I take a jump. A huge jump, warp speed. But I didn't know what to do with it afterwards, right? So I'm like, how do I make something out of this? And how do I get next? I don't want to live this life anymore. I want to live this life. And, you know, so it was a huge letdown on the tail end of that. I wound up running into a childhood friend, and we were all crazy, but, you know, we were wild child people. And he was on the rebound from whatever he did in his life, and they were going to this Spartan race, and like, hey, you might want to check this out. It wasn't in the elite bracket. It wasn't any of this stuff. It wasn't like I was trying to win. I didn't even know what it was about. I fell in love with it as soon as I got there. They have this whole little town built up, and, you know, like they put all the booths up and, you know, all this stuff, and everybody's really into it, and nobody's crapping on anybody. Everybody's there helping everybody. I mean, that's the whole premise of it. And I was like, I finally found my tribe, right? I'm like, this is awesome. I've always been kind of wandering, looking for my people in a sense. And, you know, the more you branch out, the more likely you are to find those people. And so I did that race. I ran it well. I mean, definitely above average, but not competitive with the top guys. But I left there going, I have purpose. It was the first time in my life I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I'm going to win one of these races. I'm going to win it. I shut everything down after that and fully committed. I stopped dating, started getting more serious about my training, was still battling with my diet, but better. And I knew that was the next piece of the puzzle. I also knew I needed supplements. I needed healthy stuff in my system. So I did the research, I experimented a little, and I got some healthy stuff in my system. I got off of sugar pretty, you know, nobody really totally gets off of sugar, but I cut a lot of stuff and cleaned it up, and each thing made me that much better. Through pushing myself through those races, you find a lot out about yourself, especially in the longer ones. When you're like 7-8 miles into the woods and you got 7 and 8 back or 7 and 8 to finish, you know, it's kind of a place where I think ultramarathon runners especially, but for me, it's like where you lose yourself and then you find yourself again mentally, where you're almost in a super heightened state. A lot of us call it flow state. And I was like, this is amazing. When I finish these races, I feel even better than I did when I played rugby, because it's just me. And I'm out in the woods. And I have my kids with me at every one. Having that purpose and that drive and the amount of work I put in, and it finally started spilling over. 2016 was the best year of my life. It was the best year of my kids' life. Dare to be great moments come along once in a lifetime is the quote. But that's not true. They come along all the time. All through your whole life, you have moments where you could step up and define yourself, and that takes you to the next level, to define yourself, to take you to the next level, and that's how people become successful.
Thank you for joining us today for our story on Bit for You. If you liked our story, please like it, share it, let people know what's going on. And of course, if you know anything that's going on that you find inspirational, please let us know about it.